A reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. To one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit. To another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the discernment of spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. And these are activated by one and the same Spirit, who allots to each one individually, just as the Spirit chooses. Here ends the reading.
Thanks be to God.
Well, most of you may know that in this past year, or it is the year, I should say, of turning 65 in my life. And in turning 65, you might be surprised to find out that I'm still figuring out who I am in this world. I don't know if you all have that same problem or that same issue. But for me, I continually wonder where I'm going to be when I grow up, where I'm going to end up on a certain day, what I will be doing in another couple years. Part of that has been continuing to figure out what process I'm in. And what I've learned about myself so far over these years is that I'm a person that needs to understand a process. I need to understand how it all comes together. But not just how the end result is, how did you get to the end result? So it's probably not a wonder, let me give you an example of why I ended up in music. For me, music is not just about how the tune goes. But for me, music is also about all the harmonies that intertwine and how they blend together, and the thickness and the texture of the different sounds that are used. So as a conductor, it's not important to me that everybody plays on the same note at the same time, on the right rhythm and the right pitch, but what sound do those voices or instruments bring to the music? And what would be important at this particular time because of the way the music feels or the words that are there? What would be important to hear at that particular place? So you can understand, Russ, and I point this to you, when I direct these contemporary worship services and I can't hear the instruments because where I sit and stand, it frustrates me because I need to know that what I'm directing comes together and makes sense. It's also why my choir members will tell you that I will spend more time on how to say a word than maybe how to find the pitch. But it's because the way in which we sing the word makes the chord tune. And if one person says the word differently, it changes the pitch. It's all how it comes together. Well, I have the same issue when I discuss a project at the church or at the office, or if we're going to go to Sedaya and go shopping. I have a process I have to think through. And sometimes that process frustrates other people because I'm not quite ready to jump to a conclusion because I still need to think through how we got there. Or did everybody get there at the same time? Or when my husband asks me why, do I have the explanation to answer the question? It's a part of who I am. It's a part of the gifts that I bring to a conversation, although you may not want those gifts sometimes. Because sometimes you'd rather just, let's do it, get it done, and that's the end of the question. But for me, I may still want to go, wait a minute, let's think that through another step. There's a balance in life, a balance in the way that things happen. My way is a part of it, but it has to be balanced with those who are the ones who says, okay, it's time to move on. The balance needs to be there. It's who we bring to the table. Well, this Sunday, when Pastor Stephen asked me to preach, we were discussing on the order of the calling. And we both said the second one should be called to do. And then I realized that I was going to have to be the one to talk about doing when I'm the one that takes a long time to get to it getting done. So it's rather ironic that that would be my subject for today. What we do in life has often been identified by our occupation. When someone says, "What do you do?" usually the first thing you answer with, "Well, I work at the bank," or "I farm," or "I raise cattle," or "I teach," or "I sell cars." Usually the way that we understand how we enter the world is by what we do, what our occupation is, what our job is. And that is often the reason why those, when they no longer have the job, either because it's been done away with or they retire, sometimes are totally lost because they no longer know who they are because they have no occupation to identify themselves with. It's a way that we often have identified ourselves or found a reason for our existence in the world. We live in a culture by what we do, our jobs, our titles, where we work, how we work. It's the way we exist. Many, many years ago, when we first arrived here, my husband did a little bit of work for the City Democrat. And one of the things they were getting ready to do was to put together one of those special inserts they had to do with work and occupations, and especially in the manufacturing world. And so he was given a task to go and write these articles that described these places that offered employment. And so in doing so, he went and spoke with CEOs and managers of these companies. And the one thing that he heard over and over again from these managers and these CEOs, all these people agreed that the people who came from this area, they would hire in a minute. And they would hire people from this area because we seem to have good work ethics. We take great pride in the work that we do. The jobs that we have, we take great pride because we understand it as who we are. In today's call story that was put together, and I apologize because I just kind of took different verses that I wanted you to hear, but there was another man like Samuel last week who received a call. It was a call to do something. Joseph is directed through dreams. And in each dream he is called. One might even say he was challenged. He had to make a decision, and he had to make a decision to act, a decision to protect. Here's Joseph, who as a trade is a carpenter, is a good guy. He's well respected, and he's about to be married. And then out of nowhere, he learns his fiancée is to have a child. What? Now he respects her, and he decides that because he respects her, he'll end this whole engagement very quietly and not cause her any embarrassment. But then an angel visits him. And she tells him not to be afraid and to marry this woman. And he does. Now later he's warned again in a dream to move this family. Twice he's given that dream. And he does. You see, Joseph was called to be family. He was called to be a parent. He was called to be a protector. Those were his callings to be in the world. Is that any different than many of you in what you've already done or are doing right now? You that are parents, have you not prayed and worried and talked things over and over in order to be a good family, in order to be good parents, in order to be protectors of the people you love? You that are caregivers, have you not prayed that your care you offer will be helpful? Do you not worry about the well-being of the people you care for? Are you not protectors of them while they're in your care, and more importantly, even when they're not in your care? Last week, we talked about calling. And this week, it's about calling, but there's a new word we're going to add to the whole process of this Called to Be series. And the word is vocation. We know about occupation. Occupation is the jobs that we have and the money that we receive because of these jobs. But vocation is more. When I started seminary back in, I think it was 1983, I always seem to forget what year that was, I was introduced to this whole idea of vocation by a very important woman in my life. Her name is Reverend Dr. Norma Everest. Every class I had with her was always about vocation. She debated with scholars and theologians. She lectured in standing room only auditoriums, and she visited and led workshops right in the middle of congregations, talking with people about vocation. Norma believed that living out one's faith was about understanding how the work that you do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday is connected somehow with what you hear on Sunday. The gifts that you have, the jobs that you do, the responsibilities you fulfill are your vocation. The dictionary will tell you that vocation is a summons or a strong inclination to a particular state or course of action. In the Christian life, vocation is central to the belief that God has created each of us with gifts and talents that are oriented towards specific purposes and a way of life. Vocation is how we use those gifts, those talents, those skills, the education you've been given. Sometimes the jobs that we have and that we ask people to do are not necessarily match our gifts or invite our gifts. Sometimes they have things that just need to be done, just do them. But sometimes we need to enter the process to say, how do we do it and who's involved and what does that particular person bring to the conversation? In our reading today from 1 Corinthians, we are told there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are a variety of services, but the same Lord. And a variety of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. Now, I listened a little bit. I went looking for Norma Everest this last week, and sure enough, I found her on YouTube. She's a remarkable woman who's coming kind of to the close of retirement, but she has not quit. She still feels called. She's still serving through her vocation. But one of the things she said was another light bulb in my years of living. I keep looking for light bulbs every day because I need to keep learning and growing. And that light bulb that she offered this week is this, is that when we understand that what we do is incarnational, we then will understand our purpose in life. And she talked about ministry being as incarnational. What does that mean? When we talk about incarnate, we usually talk about that during Advent and Christmas, when God becomes flesh and lives among us, right? Isn't that what we talk about? Incarnation. And when we are in ministry, serving one another, when we are out there working in the world, when we are at home, wherever we may be, and we serve each other or use our gifts in different ways, we are bringing the real presence of Christ into that moment. Whether that be a pot of chicken noodle soup, or whether that be on the board of directors of some major division you are a part of. Wherever we are, when we bring the gifts of who we are into that conversation, we are bringing the real presence of Christ into the lives of each other. Our vocations, our gifts that we have been given, when shared, is the real presence of Christ in the world. Why? Because that's the body we are a part of. When we embrace what we do as vocation, we are bringing Christ with us as we take blood pressures, teach multiplication tables, climb the poles, bringing light and power to communities. When we embrace what we do as vocation, we are bringing the life and the hope of Christ into the world, into our communities, and into our homes. May this be a week where you pause just a moment and you give thanks to God for who you are, and you celebrate the gifts that you bring, and you write them down just in case you haven't taken the time to think about it. Amen.